Hey everybody, welcome back to It's Too Late to Apologize Book Reviews. I'm Stella, and today I'm going to be doing a book tag. And I've been meaning to do this book tag for quite some time because Bart over at Book Rising with Bart tagged me in this a while ago, and I am sorry it's taken this long to get to it. So this is the Great Hitchcock book tag, which is an original tag created by Bart. So I'm going to link his channel and video in the description box below for anybody who wants to check it out. So we got 8 questions with a Hitchcock flair to them. So question number 1, Spellbound. Name a book that had you so completely enthralled you couldn't put it down. For this, I'm going to go with Margaret Atwood's The Penelopiad. Penelopiad? I don't know how you're supposed to say this. This is a story of the Odyssey, but through the eyes and what happened to Penelope, his wife, who was back in the kingdom waiting for her husband to return from the Trojan War and is fending off all these suitors who are running amok of his property. And so it's a really short read. It's under 200 pages, and there's it's very sparsely worded, so it's a really quick read. And I remember just picking it up and just blazing right through it, and really enjoyed the story and the perspective of potentially what was going through Penelope's mind as she's needing to deal with all that she's been left to in her husband Odysseus's absence. So I really enjoyed this one. Couldn't put it down. All right, next, number 2, Rope. Name a book where the murder weapon is anything other than a gun or a knife. For this one, I'm going to choose the Wool series by Hugh Howley. One of the ways that people die in this story is not the actual way that they die in reality or the impression that everybody has in the story. It's this post-apocalyptic story where humanity is living in these silos that are built into the ground, and if the manner in which this society keeps control of its population is to have stern rules in place, but then if anyone doesn't obey these rules, they get sent outside, and everybody who goes outside dies. And it's assumed that the reason they die outside is one thing, when it turns to be actually a very different thing. And I don't want to give it away, but if anybody who hasn't read it, I really enjoyed this series. So Wool by Hugh Howley. All right, next, Vertigo. Name a book with a notable scene from a dizzying height. So scratched my head a little bit for this one, but what I'm going to go with is The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. There's that scene at the end of the novel where they're at that water tower, and it's really high up, and it's rusted, and it's kind of falling apart and breaking. And so when I read it, felt like it was really high up. You know, maybe if I read it again, maybe it's not actually all that high up, but when I read it the first time, it felt really high and precarious. It was so intense. It was just like white knuckle reading through that bit, but so good. The Little Friend. All right, next, Psycho. Name a book where the main character is a psychopath. Okay, so I admittedly don't read many books about psychopaths, or at least not that readily came to mind. So I'm going to go with The Atlas 6. This is a book written by several first-person perspectives of several different characters in the story, and one of them is definitely a psychopath, or at least has psychopathic tendencies. So this is, what do we call this? Urban contemporary fantasy? Is that what we call this? And funny enough, the psychopath that first came to mind in this story would be, I think, the character of Callum, and he's described as this sort of power that he has is as an empath, which is ironic, but maybe not so ironic because it turns him into this very manipulative person who can control everyone around him. So I'm going to give it the Atlas 6. Question number 5, Frenzy. Name a book with a society or community in complete chaos. So had a few I could go with this, but I haven't really talked about this one. So I'm going to go with Stephen King's The Stand. This is a post-apocalyptic And so the world is in complete chaos and shambles. All the characters after this apocalypse that kills the majority of the humanity on the planet divide into basically the good team and the bad team, and then they must fight for domination. This is the complete and uncut edition that I ended up reading. So it has, I forget what, if it's like an extra, what is it, like 300 or 400 pages of content that was edited out in the original publication. So I read this, and it's not my favorite. It's definitely not my favorite, but The Stand. Next, number 6, Topaz. Name a book where gems and jewels are an essential part of the plot. This was a tough one, but what I end up going with is Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series. I happened to grab the Fiery Cross because it was the most accessible, but so Diana Gabaldon, this is been turned into a TV show. It is about a woman from just after the Second World War. So she ends up traveling back in time by touching the standing stones, which there are lots of standing stones around Scotland. And so she travels through the standing stones into the past, and it becomes this sort of historical fiction fantasy, sort of because of this time travel element. That's the story. And then where the gems come into play is that certain people have, I guess, a genetic or disposition to be able to travel through the standing stones. But then for those who don't have this disposition, they can use gemstones as a sort of, I don't know if it's considered like a power bank or like a sacrificial anode, I suppose, where these gems get burned up with each travel that they go through the standing stones into the past or into the future. So, gems. And I'll just say the Fiery Cross is where I gave up on this series. All right, next, The Birds. Name a book where a bird or birds play an important part in the story. The only book I could think of with birds that are any sort of integral part would be William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. And that would be the vultures that follow this family's tragic progress to try to bury the matriarch of their family. And so that's what I would give it to. The vultures in As I Lay Dying. Creepy. Number 8, Marnie. Name a book with a troubled or shady female character. For this one, I'm going to go with Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. So the main character is a troubled woman. She's gone through a lot of traumatic experiences in her life, and it's this sort of very touching and tragic story, and is semi-autobiographical for Maya Angelou. It's I remember quite enjoying the read, and it is quite tragic, so sometimes it's hard to say that you enjoyed a tragic story, but it is quite touching. I highly recommend. So I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That was the tag. Tag others. I don't do a whole lot of tags, so again, I always feel bad tagging people. So who I'm going to tag is Brian over at Bookish. I'll tag The Falcon Reads. I'll tag AJ Dunn. If any of you guys have not done this tag yet, please go ahead and check it out and do it yourself if you like. If I haven't tagged you and you'd like to do it, go ahead and do that. Check out Bart's channel, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.